League One final and championship conference final preview show, but we got to talk about the Boger bomb. Memphis, according to Tom Boger, says that Memphis 901 has transferred their USL Championship franchise rights to Santa Barbara. Per sources, Memphis will not play in 2025. Santa Barbara will join the USL Championships in 2026. The league has approved it. This transfer is due to no viable stadium solution for Memphis. There's a lot of ramifications to this. There is a lot of things to talk about in terms of conference alignment and whatnot, but I think the most important thing to talk about here is Memphis is losing their club over, once again, government kind of semantics and not having stadium finances, and they're left without a home.
I mean, it's a story we've seen a number of times at this level, right? And where we get a team at the end of the season that doesn't want to keep losing money, doesn't have a stadium situation that's quite settled. It just leads to instability year in and year out. And it's really just unjust for these fan bases and these communities that have poured their support into clubs, found a sense of belonging with the people that go out every weekend and support these teams. We can get into what this means for the championship and the optics and everything with Santa Barbara, but I really do just want to throw it out there. Like, you hate to see this happen for the passionate supporters in Memphis.
Yeah, and this is coming from someone who's also lost their club previously and has still followed the league since then, that it's just something you never want to see happen at any level within U.S. soccer. It's not good for the game here, and it doesn't breathe a sense of confidence into the viability of the sport if you see a team like this have to go on what you would hope is just a hiatus and a sense to potentially return in the future. But we've seen how that's been with the OKC Energy, that promise to return in the future might not always pan out, and it might still be just something of a dream to continue. So our hearts definitely go out to the Memphis 901 FC fan base, the supporters groups, the communities, and even the players too. If this is how they were finding out that their team isn't returning for next year, you really hope that the players, the front office, the coaching staff can all find their next role, their next job, to have it be within the championship, League One, another league. So it really just is an all around just kind of crappy situation.
Something I kind of said behind, into our chat, but I'm going to kind of throw it out there. There was this rumor that was kind of when I say kind of, I heard it like twice, that Memphis would not be in the championship next year. I didn't think that's what this meant. I thought this was going to be a drop down to League One, possibly play at Memphis University, whichever one it is. And play at their soccer stadium and continue that way. This is not what I expected. And so this is just kind of just legalese, I guess, soccer legalese. This was a transfer of their USL Championship transfer rights, which means Memphis did not get League One rights in return. They just simply sold their championship rights. What that means in the future for Memphis is that in order for Memphis to make a return, they're going to need to buy championship rights again, likely from a new owner, and basically start all over. This is not going to be they return from hiatus, we're back, and whatever, kind of like OKC. OKC still has their territory rights. They don't have to buy their way back into the league. In order for Memphis to return, assuming that the territory rights from, say, Fort Worth, that whole thing is not, or Austin is not transferred over to Memphis, they're going to have to spend the full, what is it now, like $30-something million to buy back into the league.
I think the thing with Memphis, you obviously didn't think the writing was on the wall, but looking at some of the indicators, like they averaged 6,600 fans back in 2019. And it's been a slow decline every year since then, to the point that they were under a 3,000 average attendance in 2024. We've seen the quality of the pitch. We've seen some of those kind of outside factors that just show that Memphis maybe didn't have it fully together in the way that inspires confidence. That doesn't make it less surprising. And it also kind of plants the seed of fear of, if you're another club who's dropping off in attendance a little bit, who doesn't own their own venue and thus has to absorb the cost of rent, doesn't get as much from the gate, what is your future in a league where it's hard to find that financial viability?
Yeah, and John, you've followed all the attendances for this entire season. I'm trying to scroll back and find at least your stats on that. And there were only a handful of teams who saw at least a growth in their attendance year over year from last season. I think that was Charleston was one of them, and I can't recall the name of the other.
Charleston and Loudoun were the big two, yeah.
And it's just kind of a growing concern that you see a team at this level dropping out of the league and not being able to make it financially viable. And all of us know how razor thin the margins are for some of these teams if they're turning a profit, even to begin with. And it's just really a concern for USL as a whole. But I mean, to shift the conversation, how does this feel for like Santa Barbara, who by all accounts were fairly quiet and much of their lead up, they have been part of at least a growth into USL 1, and now they're going to be making an even larger jump up into the championship in 2026.
Let me just kind of address this really fast. The question of soccer night in Detroit, why couldn't they play at the Liberty Bowl? Another configuration was wonky, but could they have made it work? No, not really, because kind of like what John mentioned, they would have to eat the cost. And it is much more financially viable for the club to stay at AutoZone Park because it's a smaller venue. Thus, they have to pay less in stuff like security, electricity, plumbing, and concessions. That's the other one. It is cheaper to rent a smaller venue. The issue with going to the Liberty Bowl, despite the fact that it probably would be better for soccer in general, is that Memphis would have to eat a lot more cost, which clearly was the biggest issue here.
Thinking on the Santa Barbara side of things a little bit, obviously we'll wait until 2026 for them to really get the ball rolling. If you were talking to people in League One circles, kind of with that outside perspective, there were some doubts about Santa Barbara heading into 2025 just because they had gone radio silent. Whether that's an indicator of trouble behind the scenes or they were just kind of buckling down and getting ready for this announcement remains to be seen. But it's an interesting setup for Santa Barbara, who kind of retrenches the USL in California after a bit of loss given the exit of the MLS Next Pro sides, given the loss of San Diego last season. It's an interesting and good market to have, albeit at the expense of Memphis, makes it really quite bittersweet.
Yeah, you mentioned California really gaining another new foothold in USL teams. This will be the 5th team in California in the USL Championship. And when you throw in Las Vegas and Phoenix, you have really a nice number of teams in that part of the country. And we always used to think in the past that the Western Conference was so spread out, but to now have about 7 teams within a regional kind of closeness to each other in that part of the country is really something of growth for the USL Championship. And ironically enough, now you have a Birmingham team in the Eastern Conference who seems to be on a kind of an island right now in the Southeast, which is something strange to think about.
Yeah, the Birmingham side of this is that with the addition of Lexington, Birmingham was already preparing to go to the West. The only way that was not the case was if someone like Miami were to drop out or another team in the East, which is still not, I guess you can never say it's out of the cards because, well, this came out of nowhere. But as of now, you are looking at a Birmingham team that even if a team drops out in the East, that they are going to be guaranteed to go to the West. Your other 2 teams that are on that line is going to be Indy 11, Louisville City, and Detroit City. Those are your three other teams that could see a flip to the West, but let's be really brutally honest here. Louisville City is never going to the West. That will never happen. Indy 11 is their biggest rival, and for, again, Lou City, big rivalry, one of the biggest rivalries that the league loves to promote is Indy 11 versus Lou City. They're not going to lose that away fixture. In Detroit City, having Indy, Louisville, and Pittsburgh in that close radius in the East, the league is not going to move them. So Birmingham is guaranteed essentially to go to the West here because they don't have anybody near them already. So it's not like they're going to be losing any local rivalries, and they're the closest one on that line. So how is Birmingham going to deal with the travel now that they're in the West when they're going to have to travel even farther than Memphis did all last year, which who knows if that is something that played into this decision, but it certainly couldn't have helped.
No, it's an interesting conundrum in terms of that conference divide. Like you think about Lexington and Brooklyn coming in, pretty certain Eastern Conference teams. If there are any other changes in the setup, you kind of think the USL has to look at divisions once again. Maybe not to the extreme of those 4-team pods that we saw during COVID, but something a little bit more regional that just makes it, I don't know, less silly than something like Louisville City possibly playing in the West. Like that doesn't make any sense for really any party involved. You can still get some interdivision games, of course, but I don't know, thinking outside the box a little bit would be the obvious answer if it goes to that extreme.
I mean, if we're going to have 25 teams in the league next year, that's 5 divisions of 5.
And Taylor, I will say Memphis ended up with the 4th best away record in the West. So you don't have to mourn about the away travel burden, hopefully.
No, they just decide to sign good players. I don't know.
Well, hey, there's no one who's going to just poach the Legion's best players at this point.
Legion will poach themselves and then somehow only sign the wingers. It's weird. But, you know, something that is to be talked about, if they go to a 3-team division, which would, or not 3-team, excuse me, 3 division conferences, essentially, it would completely open the door to Jaeger Cup fully, as you would play everybody in that conference home and away, and you play everybody else in the league once. You're down to 28 odd matches. Yeah. That opens the door for Jägermeister. And if the USL Championship or USL HQ was looking for a way to entice championship owners, saying, hey, you're going to be playing less matches next year, do you want to get more tickets through the door? Do you want to open up your doors and get all 36? That's probably their best way of doing it.
No, I mean, given the way that the USL Championship is growing, given how hard it makes it to schedule, kind of cutting back on league games and throwing up those Jägermeister Cup dates has to be the logical solution to still give the owners the matches they need in their home venues. Would not be surprised to see us kind of move in that direction heading into hopefully 2025.
All right. Well, that is Memphis talk, and we'll obviously talk about this more when we have more conversations, when we find out more information. I do have one quick question. Was Santa Barbara one of the Super League teams, possibly?
Yes, I'm 95% sure.
I was pretty sure of that as well. I don't think, obviously, this is going to impact that, but if anything, no. Yes. So I guess 2026 for everything still. So
yeah,
be on the lookout for that.
Looks like only Oakland, Phoenix, and Tucson in terms of kind of West Coasty Super League clubs. Interesting.
Spokane.
Well, I mean, of the new batch, but yes.
But Phoenix has said that they're not involved with that project, and Tucson was supposed to be alive, but they're still dead.
Yeah. So
we'll see.